Now for this part of the tutorial, we are going to be discussing about the creation process for this weave pattern that's used all over the chair. And for this, we're going to be using the latest version, 2.71 release candidate number 2 that I just downloaded from blender.org website. And it now has the ability for us to use Cycle's render engine to bake our texture maps. And after we model a portion of this geometry, we're going to be baking normals and dirt maps. So let's take a closer look at what the actual structure of this weave pattern. You can see the double sets here of vertical threads. And then on the horizontal, we have single threads, but they're interleaving between above and below each of these vertical guys. Okay, so it's a quite simple pattern. Let's start by modeling these vertical threads. On my scene, I'm going to delete the default objects. I'm going to create a curve, Bezier. Top view here, I'm going to go into edit mode and move these points around. I want to make them vertical. Okay, rotate 45 degrees, 90 degrees. And to the spline properties here, I'm going to add a bevel. 0.1 should be okay. Just need more steps and full circle. Let's make this a little bit larger, bigger. Okay, now since I need two of these, they're a set of two, just easier to move them like this. And I'm going to add a modifier to make all the other ones now. Add an array. I would like more space between them. 5 should be enough. If it's not, we can change that later. About 6 of these. Let me just make this a bit more like a square shape. Okay. Verticals are done. Let me name this vertical. And let's go now into the horizontal one. For the horizontal one, you just have to duplicate this and go into the edit mode. I'm going to select one of these splines and just going to delete it. And also turn off the array while in edit mode. On the above top view, I'm going to select everything and rotate according to my 3D cursor 90 degrees. And I'm also going to move this on the x-axis until it's aligned between two of these vertical ones here. Let me just scale this down a bit. Okay, move this out. Control point. And I'm going to start extruding until I meet the middle of the next vertical one. Again on the x-axis. Extrude on the x. Okay. Okay. And now let's select alternating control points here, and I'm going to move these guys above till there's a small gap here. And the remaining ones, I'm going to move them on the z-axis, move them down till they're below the horizontal ones, the vertical ones. Now I'm going to select all my points again, and we'll Shift D to duplicate it and move it on the y-axis, something like this. And I'll scale them on the z-axis -1. So now they are interleaving. One goes over and one goes under. Same thing for the next one, and so on. This was pretty easy, wasn't it? So now we're going out here, and on our array, instead of making a copy on the x-axis, we're going to do on the y-axis. What, 1? A little bit over 1. 1.2. Yeah, that looks good. Just have to increase this now. And we have our model done. Now we need to create the object that's going to receive that baked texture. So I just created a plane here, and I'm going to move this around in the center. I'm going to, instead of making one huge texture like this, I'm going to avoid the corners, the edges, because the lighting here from ambient occlusion, for example, tends to be a little bit different than on the center, because we don't have extensions here to our objects. So there are no occlusion object to occlude rays around here, so the edges here tend to be a lot lighter than the actual center here. And if you leave your texture like that with lighter borders, it's definitely going to be noticeable once you start repeating it. Okay, so it has to be seamless. For that, to avoid that, I'm going to use here, I'm going to start my object, put it around here. And for the image to be tileable, it had to start and end in a place that looks exactly the same. I'll show you what I mean with that. First, I'm going to use as a reference, as a starting point, this horizontal thread that's going underneath the vertical. So you can see that I'm going to align here this vertex right here in this edge of this horizontal with the vertical one. And here at the end, I have to finish again on the same thread when it's going underneath the other vertical one. So I'm going to move this here. We zoom in to make a perfect align here, or near perfect. Okay. So I know that when this texture starts repeating itself, it's going to look like there's no seams here between the start and the end of this. The same thing has to be done here on the horizontal, on the vertical. I like to leave this close to a square shaped, so it's easier for cycles to sample the pixel textures. Move it on the y-axis. Again, I'm aligning to a thread, the horizontal thread, that's going underneath the vertical one. Okay, this should be fine. So this is the actual area that I'm going to take my texture. Just to make things a little bit easier, I'm going to move this a little bit above. And okay, that looks fine. A little more things that we need right now. First, we need to create an image that's going to be our texture. Since I'm going to make a normal map first, normal, I'm going to call this normal. This is the actual width and height of the output. 1024 seems to be okay for an image like this, for a chair. I'm going to leave the alpha channel and press OK. So my texture will be baked here on this normal map. We need to make UVs for this plane. So I like to use project from view bounds, so it makes my plane exactly the size of the image texture that's going to be generated. And the last thing that we need is to, I'm going to convert this to a node editor, is to create a material for this guy that's going to be reading that image texture that I just created. Right now it is black, but this is where I'm going to bake it. I don't need to link these two guys. I just need for it to exist somewhere inside this plane. Okay. One last thing for this to work on these meshes here, I have to convert them to mesh object. So I'll just join them now, make it easier for me to select them. Make sure you save your file before you do this, in case you'd like to change the geometry. So I'll select it first, and then I'll select my plane here, so it is the active object. I'll go to the bake tab here and go. You want to bake a normal, and make sure you select this option selected to active, so it knows where to project those textures to. Let's bake this. Created my normal texture. one thing that I'd like to avoid here is this. There's an option here to create a margin. What it does is it renders your object with the alpha channel and everything that's supposed to do, but it then starts repeating for 16 pixels in this case the last pixels that you have there. So it starts, there's supposed to be a gap here, but let's say the last pixel that it rendered was this one, and then it starts repeating that green pixel all the way 16 units pixels in this direction and this direction and this direction. So it tries to avoid some outlines that you tend to have on rendered images, like where there's a semi-transparent pixel and then a black background, so it sometimes creates a black aura around your image. So this is what it's trying to do, but since we are using normal maps here, we don't need this. I can just use a zero margin here. Let me show you the difference. So it is here, it's not repeating that last green pixel there that you see. Okay, so let's save this. Save as image. I'm going to save it as a normal here. I already had that image. Just make sure you're using the alpha channel, and PNG should be okay. One more thing now, it's I like to make a dirt map, also known as ambient occlusion. The dirt map will be used more to make the corners around here where it's where you have junction of these meshes to make them darker. Okay. So ambient occlusion here is a zero margin again, bake. A few things about this result. You can see that it's quite noisy. That's because I have a low sampling. I didn't change anything yet on these guys. But since I'm supposed to simulate dirt, actual dirt, not just a painted texture there, I'll leave it like this, noisy like this, okay? But there's another thing that's bothering me, is that you kind of see a lighter edge around some places. That's because we don't have anything underneath this mesh that should be occluding the coming in, the rays that are shooting this way, shooting down here, okay? So to avoid that, we can just add here a mesh, scale it up, and move it down on the z-axis. So now this guy will be occluding rays around here, so it'll make these darker. Let's select our whole plane, select this guy and the projecting one that's supposed to be active, and bake again. So you now see I don't have those white borders, there, lighter borders there. Okay, we do need an alpha on this image. So just go to image, save as image, and we'll save this as dirt. Save as image. Okay, let's check how's the tiling of our texture. You just have to press N here and then ask it to repeat the texture. So you can see that this is an edge here and is repeating perfectly. You don't see a seam there. Let's check the other image, the normal. Repeating. Beautiful.